We are told, and I believe this is correct, that there are three on the short list. They are Ketanji Brown Jackson, Leandra Kruger, and Michelle Childs. Ketanji Brown Jackson currently sits on the DC Circuit, which is sort of the second highest court, often a springboard to SCOTUS. She served for about 8 years on the federal district court here in DC before that. Leandra Kruger is a justice on the California Supreme Court, where she is known as a kind of centrist who can bridge the gap between the left and right flanks. And Michelle Childs is currently a federal judge on the district court in South Carolina. She's been nominated to the DC Circuit, and she is, we are told, a favorite of Jim Clyburn, a very powerful kind of kingmaker. He is pushing her for this spot, and Lindsey Graham has decided to join him and say that Michelle Childs is the consensus pick. I would rank them in the order I just listed them. KBJ is my number one, Leandra Kruger is my number two, big drop, and Michelle Childs is my number three.
Well, so, and you say, like, we are told that Jim Clyburn is pushing Michelle Childs. No, he is screaming from the rooftops, it seems like. And he, the other day, was quoted and basically said that this pick has to be bipartisan. It cannot be passed if there's not bipartisan support behind the Supreme Court pick, which is BS. And to me, what I'm fearful of is that this seems to be gaining some steam. Maybe it's because Clyburn's talking to every paper that will listen and is pushing her very publicly. But I'm a little bit fearful that this kind of campaign is going to work, even though Labor has spoken out against Childs a bit.
Right. And Labor has spoken out against her because, of course, she was a management side lawyer, a corporate lawyer who litigated against unions and against labor. And I think it's great that we're seeing these criticisms of her record, because that's how the Federalist Society thinks when the Federalist Society is vetting its own judges and justices. And I think that the left could learn a great deal from how FedSoc vets its own people. You do not just look at a handful of their decisions if they're on the bench, or a handful of their cases if they're litigators. You need to ask if they lived their values. And in FedSoc, that means they devoted themselves to abolishing abortion rights and gay equality and dismantling the administrative state. On the left, that means incentivizing, boosting up labor, encouraging unionization, helping criminal defendants, encouraging LGBTQ equality, abortion access, all of that stuff. Michelle Childs did not live her values. She cashed in as a corporate lawyer. Many people do that. I'm not saying it's the worst thing in the world, but compare her to Ketanji Brown Jackson, who was a federal public defender for many years, who zealously defended a Guantanamo Bay detainee to such a degree that the Daily Caller is currently running a ridiculous hit piece on her, accusing her of basically sympathizing with terrorists. I think the left should look at those two options and say, choose your fighter. Would you like the union busting corporate lawyer, or would you like the person who is so committed to the Fifth and Sixth Amendments, to defending unpopular criminal defendants, that she went out to Guantanamo Bay and put her career and reputation on the line? This was a very controversial thing in the mid-aughts, to defend due process and habeas rights of these individuals who were deemed enemy combatants. I think that's an easy choice. I am a little bit puzzled why Jim Clyburn doesn't agree with me.
Well, I can come up with a lot of reasons why Jim Clyburn doesn't agree with you, but let's put that aside for a moment, because the other aspect of this, this is important, and on some level, I'm just speaking to my dad and maybe to Emma's folks too here, because there are generations of lawyers who do not understand this concept, which is that the Federalist Society has been able to make being a member of the Federalist Society a non-starter. If you're not a member of the Federalist Society, you will not get appointed to be a judge by a Republican president ever under any circumstances at this point. And
they have like cocktail parties where they audition.
There's a whole network.
Right, yeah.
But the point being is that they dictate the career paths of lawyers coming out of law school to go into certain types of law, to make certain types of decision from day one. You come out of law school, you're 22 years old, 24 years old, 25 years old, wherever it is, there are specific routes that you take if you want to become a federal judge. You got to clerk here, or you got to serve you got to work for this corporate firm, or you got to do this. On the left, we need to do something like that as well. And they successfully used, and I can't remember who the nominee was, a membership in the American Constitution Society, which is, the sort of left's attempt to create a federalist society type of, as a detriment in past years. The Republicans were able to use that against it. There needs to be on the left a system and a funnel where you are rewarded for being a public defender. You are rewarded for fighting against corporations polluting. You're rewarded for a whole host of things, values that we want lawyers to have, and we want society to look that way. So it's not just a question of you can't hold a lawyer's clients against them. We've got to end that when it comes to judgeships.
Yes. And I would sort of elaborate on this a bit. The reason that FedSoc has been so successful isn't just that it brings people into this clubby network and boosts their careers. It's that many of those individuals end up getting boosted to the federal judiciary. And so the ultimate prize as you're going up the ladder is often a federal judgeship after years of lucrative corporate work usually. And I would say, obviously the American Constitution Society is not a real alternative to FedSoc. I completely agree with you that the left needs to build out an infrastructure that creates a real pipeline from law school straight to the federal courts that incentivizes progressive advocacy. I think that Joe Biden is doing the most a president possibly can to help create that infrastructure now, because he is very actively and conscientiously rewarding people like Ketanji Brown Jackson who lived their values with federal judgeships, rewarding Black women who refuse to cash out and go into corporate work, rewarding an unprecedented number of LGBTQ people, of women, of people of color who did not just go to Jones Day and help bust unions or whatever, but actually went and did the hard work of protecting civil liberties and protecting important regulations. They are now getting judgeships as well. And so a generation of law students right now are looking at this pipeline that Biden has kind of created or facilitated and saying, that could be me. I could also start on this path. They can't do it as easily as FedSoc because they can't just sign a form and pay dues and get on the fast track to the courts. But we are starting to see this infrastructure develop. And it's one reason why I have been very critical of Biden not nominating any reproductive rights advocates to the federal judiciary thus far, because young, very excited and ambitious law students are going to look and see that Biden hasn't nominated abortion rights lawyers and say, well, defending abortion rights as your primary career path must be a poison pill. So I'm going to avoid doing it. And that is the exact opposite message that the White House should be sending, because George W. Bush nominated a bunch of people who spent their entire careers litigating against abortion, who said abortion is an evil on par with slavery and I am devoting myself to destroying it. They got federal judgeships. A generation of lawyers decided that attacking abortion was the way to go. And they are now going to overturn Roe v. Wade. So there needs to be a big picture attitude here where we look at every single progressive cause and make sure that there's real representation. But Biden is doing almost as good a job as you could expect. And now I think the work falls on the progressive legal community to back him up, building out that pipeline further.
This is it's such an important point. I'm so glad you've been talking about this, because it really there just broadly is not an appreciation of that, and it allows people to see what's been going on the right, and how also we should say a lot of these when McConnell pushed through 180, I think it was, lifetime federal appointments,
234.
234 over the course of 4 years. So many of them also were hiding the ball because they also knew that was part of the strategy as well. But everybody could be sure how they were going to adjudicate. There's not going to be any suitors. We're never going to see a David Souter again, where a Republican president is going to appoint somebody who later, actually he seems a little bit more moderate than we thought at the time.